This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. A little best of August 2022, reaching back into the archives. Two very important episodes that I guarantee you will help you to either live a better life or make some money. 100% true, guaranteed. First, Tim Grover, Michael Jordan's personal trainer. Great stuff. Second, the legendary trader Mark Minervini. And if you can't learn something from Mark, from his mindset, his way of doing things, there's something defective in you. I mean, if you've got this defective whatever, where you can't understand Mark or you can't understand Tim, retire, give up, put the feeding tube in, you're done. Without any further delay, without any further warm up from me, let's jump right in to Tim and Mark. Now, this conversation is why I do my podcast. Now, don't get me wrong, I love all my guests, but it's one of those ones where it's something from perhaps my youth that I was always curious about, and I never expected to have a conversation with Michael Jordan's personal trainer. In fact, my guest today, his very first pro athlete client as a trainer was one Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player who has ever played. And I got to tell you, Tim has some fantastic lessons about life, even how he made his way to be at Michael Jordan's doorstep, that very first meeting. Wow. A little bit of luck, but also a lot of taking a chance, putting himself out there. And that's just how he got to Jordan. But those lessons he learned along the way, those winning lessons, he is here today to share a little with all of us. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my conversation today with Tim Grover. You've got about, I think, looking at ages, you've got about 4 years on me. So I want to take you back in time. I'm going to go a little fishing here in the beginning. I want to take you back in time to 1982. At that point in time, I was living 15 miles from Washington, D.C. I was a rabid Georgetown fan. My father went to Georgetown, and I sure as heck did not want that team in baby blue to win down at UNC. I loved watching that guy named Michael Jordan, but I did not want that team to win. When I think back to the physical shape, and I can still remember, look, he was a young guy. He was a freshman in college, but the Michael Jordan as a freshman in college was not the one that you ended up remaking physically, huh?
In college, he was 197 pounds. After our years of work, he was all the way played between 213 and 218.
Do you remember watching that game?
Yes, of course. Everybody watched that game. I mean, there was something about him that was just, I won't say different. I think that word is used too often. There was something unique about him. And then hearing how all the different coaches described him and his work ethic and his preparation and his different mindset and his detail to the game. So it didn't surprise me the way his career ended up being, and him being able to take that shot during that moment as a freshman and make it.
Maybe you're right. Different is overused, but to win the national championship as a freshman, kind of a rare thing for people that know something about college basketball.
Yeah, and never hesitated when he took that shot. Just like, all right, here it is. Ball came to him, saw it was open, stepped into it, hit nothing but net.
When did you guys first meet up? Let's get granular and tell that story, the setup. How did it happen? Because obviously that changed your life to have that meet up, huh?
It did. No question about that. I actually started with him in 1989. He'd already been in the league, 4 or 5 years?
He had a 63-point game against the Celtics. He'd already been doing some big stuff.
Oh, he'd been doing some special stuff. I mean, listen, one of the coaches after 4 games into his rookie year said he's already the best player in the NBA. He had already been doing some special things, obviously his rookie year. And then the second year, he had the foot injury. Then he came back for the big game that you just mentioned and had a lot of individual success up to that point, but had never won the championship. I was working at a local health club during that time. My education is I have a master's degree in exercise science and a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I always knew I wanted to train professional athletes. So there was a small article in one of the local papers saying how Michael Jordan's tired of taking a physical abuse from the Detroit Pistons. He's looking to bulk up. All right. So what I did was I was like, okay, there's no way the organization is going to hire an individual who's never worked with a professional athlete or outside to work with him. So what I did was like, all right, if I can get in with some of the other players, then there's a chance he could see my results and maybe he'd be interested somewhere down the line. So what I did was back then, remember, no emails, no text messaging, very few cell phones. They had the big ones with a backpack on them. So it wasn't the ones that fit in your pocket. So I did was I wrote 14 letters to every single player on the Chicago Bulls organization, handwritten letters, put them in a mailbox, hoping they would get to the players. So what happens is when you send letters to athletes in that time, they get thrown in a pile of fan mail. So every athlete, if you put their name on it, somebody in the back puts them in the person's locker and say, okay, here, and then it's the athlete's decision whether they want to open it or not. Well, obviously somebody opened one of my letters. I still don't know who it was. And it was sitting in another player's locker. And Michael saw this letter in somebody else's locker and reached for it and pulled it out and told the team athletic trainer and the team physician at the time, hey, he said, find out what this person is about.
Oh, come on, really? Is that true? Come on, really?
That's how this happened.
Serendipity.
The one person I didn't send a letter to was him, because I was like, okay, it doesn't make any sense to send a letter to him because there's no way the organization is going to let me work with him. There's no way he's going to be interested in working with me. So I just said, I'm not even going to send him a letter. So then the team athletic trainer and the team doctor both called me and they said, hey, we have somebody who's interested in your services, which was very unique because during that time, training was always kept in-house. Nobody hired anybody outside.
What was in this letter? You just stopped Michael Jordan 5 or 6 years into the league. He sees a letter randomly, doesn't know you from Adam, and he then gets the Bulls to find you. What was in this letter?
It explained who I was and what I did. And the key to the letter was, and I talk about this in the book, Winning, everybody would tell him what to think. This is what the books say. This is what's going on. Here it is, and so forth. I wrote some stuff in there on things that you wouldn't find in studies, you wouldn't find in books about training. I said, hey, listen, I have different methods, different ideas, different thoughts on how an athlete should be trained. And I just put a couple of examples in there, nothing detailed, but just a couple of things that were different than what everybody else. So obviously something in that letter caught his eye, because when you look at him now, so many years later, when you watched him play, his game wasn't just about what to think, it was how to think. He was very fluent in his movement. He really trusted his instinct. He was so well prepared. My thought process was kind of the same, not knowing that's going to be the edge that got me there. So that's, in my estimation, I've never asked him what was it about that letter. Put it another way, knowing his competitiveness, he could have been simply, why in the hell did I not get a letter? Why did everybody else get a letter, but not me? So here I'm telling you this elaborate story about what I think it is, and it could be something very simple as like, oh, what's this guy think I'm not good enough? For 3 months, we went back and forth. They put me through a bunch of practical exams, a bunch of written stuff to make sure I knew what I was doing. So 3 months time passed. I still didn't know who they were preparing me for. So then they said, hey, here's the address. We want you to go meet the client at 1:30. They just still didn't tell me who it was. So they gave me the address. I went over there. This was before the big gated house. You could just walk up to the house. So I rang the doorbell once, no one answered, rang it twice, no one answered, rang it a third time. And Michael Jordan opens up the door.
Obviously, you were pretty well grounded to be writing that letter, the content of that letter, but there still must have been this interesting euphoria. You had a temper in that moment, didn't you?
Well, you know what? I'm not a starstruck person. That's the one thing. At that moment, that was very advantageous for me. Listen, I admire what they do. I know how hard they work to get to those areas, no matter what line of work they're in, but I'm not a starstruck individual. So I was just like, all right, here's an opportunity. Even though he was the one individual I did not really prepare for as well as I prepared for the other individuals. But since he was on TV so much, just like you described, there was so much emphasis put on him since that shot. So it was easy to understand and gather information about him and watch his game and what he did. So that was already kind of innate in my head to see what he needed to work on and what he didn't need to work on. He invited me in the house. Well, the first thing before I walked into the house, I had Converse gym shoes on, so we know that wasn't going to work. So I had to take those shoes off. So we went inside the house. We talked for about 45 minutes. I explained my philosophy to him, what my ideas and thoughts were. He was all about, he goes, I need to get bigger. I need to get stronger. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's down the line. These are the things we need to address right now. And he was the first individual that probably came at him and didn't allow him just to dominate the conversation and say, hey, this is what I want. And I was like, no, this is, in order for this to work, this is what we need to do. And the things I told him that were more important was, he's going, I want to be more athletic. I want to be explosive. I want to be more stronger. I want to be able to do these things. So what I said, well, you have some injuries. You have these little nagging injuries that come all the time, your ankle injuries, groin strains, your hamstrings. I said, let's address those things. If we address those things, you'll automatically be stronger. You'll automatically be faster. You'll automatically be able to jump high. You'll automatically be a better basketball player. So imagine your body functioning at an optimum level. So he goes to me, this doesn't sound right. I said, it doesn't get any righter. I said, give me a chance. Let me prove what I can do. We never discussed money. We never discussed any of this. He goes, I'll give you 30 days. And 30 days turned into 15 years.
Of those 30 days, how many days per week were you getting?
Every single day that they had practice or a game, I was with him.
For the average Joes out there, they're kind of curious. I mean, obviously, whatever a training program you get for one of the world's greatest athletes is not going to be the average Joe training program. What did you start to do in those first 30 days that got him hooked? Was it particular exercises? Was it the mindset talk? What was it? Was it just you? What got him hooked on your direction?
What got him hooked was I told him exactly how he was going to feel and where he was going to feel things. 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, 96. I was telling him exactly, hey, this is what your mind and body is going to feel during these times. When we do this particular exercise, this is what we're going to do. This is how your body's going to feel. This is what you're going to be able to do on the court. This is what's going to be a little bit difficult here. This is the time you're going to have to adjust your shot. So all these things were laid out. It was kind of like already telling him what the future was going to be as it related to his body, so he could make the adjustments that were necessary. And when we do this exercise, you may feel here. We do this, your ankle is going to have a lot more mobility here. When we do this thing, your hips are going to open up more over here. And also the program that I did it wasn't conventional to what everybody else would do. Normally you see people in gyms and when they work out, I'm just going to use a shoulder press movement for an example. You'll always see if they have 30-pound dumbbells in one hand, they're going to have a 30-pound dumbbell in the other hand. And I would hand him different weights in different hands and have different reps for one side versus the other. Because I would say, listen, one side is already overused when you constantly play. This is the direction. So now we need to focus in more on the other side. You have a strength deficit on this side. So we need to use more weight on one side, less weight on the other side. And the same thing with his legs. So stuff that was actually still is unconventional to this day. He started to see the results quickly. And with me being able to tell him, hey, this is how you're going to feel. And him, okay, well, this guy actually knows what he's talking about.
You're a guy in your 20s at this moment in time, right? What, mid to late 20s?
Yes.
And so is he. He's got a couple of years on you, I think, if I'm right. And you said you wanted to train pro athletes. Was he your first pro athlete?
He was my first professional athlete.
This is the craziest story, Tim, right? It really is. This is the craziest story. What I love about it is the letter part, man. That's what people don't understand. I did a bunch of that kind of stuff and met some really interesting people from a similar technique. And people just don't understand that idea of just you having that self-confidence to go give it a shot. Yes, there's some serendipity and it's fortuitous that Michael spotted it, but still, you had to take action.
You have to take action. No one's paying attention to you unless you take action. I have this thing that says, hey, what's the one thing that hasn't gone up in price in the world? Talk. Talk is cheap. It's always going to be cheap. It's the action you put behind that talk. It's the action you put behind your studies. It's the action you put behind your education. It's the action you put behind the action that allows you to get closer to winning. And it was just like, hey, I saw the opportunity. This is what's going to happen. And okay, you know what? I had rather given it my best during this opportunity to try to get whatever was available than to not have even sent those letters and found out somebody else who either sent those letters or ran into them by accident ended up having the career that I ended up having. That regret would have hurt me more than me not getting the opportunity to work with him, but I know I did everything possible to get to that area.
I still remember your name coming up back in the day, but it was all secretive. Everyone kind of knew that Michael Jordan had this trainer. There was no leaks. No one knew what was going on. It was all kind of like this, who's this guy, Tim, this mystery thing, Jordan's great. Who's the trainer? What's going on?
I didn't speak to the media. I knew my role. My role was like, listen, obviously back then there was no social media, but even if there was social media, I would have not been that person. You could see that even on my social media, it's very rarely do I post anything about my clients unless they either tell me to or that there's a reason behind it. To me, the best endorsement you can get is when your athlete talks about you, whenever that is. If he's ever asked, let him explain. My job is to be that person behind the scenes, keep him as healthy as possible, keep as strong as possible, keep functioning at the highest level, let his results speak for my work. I would just show up, I would do my job. And Michael always had this saying later on in his career when other athletes would ask if they could work with me, he would say, hey, he goes, listen, I don't pay Tim to train me. He goes, I pay him not to train anyone else.
I caught you saying that on the Skip and Shannon show the other day, and I thought it was great. How quickly did you get beyond with Michael? And I want to talk a little Kobe and perhaps some other clients later in the conversation, but how quickly did you get past only the physical with Michael to the winning mindset conversations with Michael? How did that unfold?
Well, obviously I had to build a trust. He was extremely competitive. He had his thought process. So people come in as a quote unquote trainer expert. They try to throw everything at an individual. I've always taken things into pieces. I was like, okay, let's figure out something about let's master one concept first before we delve into the other, So the mindset actually was the last thing I wanted to address. First thing was the physical part. The second thing was the nutrition part. Then the third thing was the mental aspect. As I saw him mastering the physical aspect of it, then we started to put more emphasis on the nutrition part. We started to add that component in there. Then we started to drip the mental component in there. And what I would do was I would watch him. I would watch his body language. I would see I'd ask him how his practice and what went on, because I didn't work for the organization, so I didn't have access to all the practices. So, hey, what happened in practice? He would tell me, hey, how'd you handle this situation? Man, he goes, man, you ask a lot of questions. Yeah, I said, it's important for me to ask these questions so I can get a better understanding of what's going on in your head. I'd watch how he handled the media. I'd watch how he did after a win, after a loss, his tone, how he talked to different teammates. I would ask him questions. Hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And he would tell me why he did certain situations. I would keep notes of those things. I would point out things like he would handle a situation one way, and I would see how this teammate played and reacted the following game. Then if he handled that same situation in a different way, how that teammate played and handled. And I would ask, hey, what did you say? What did you say to that individual? What did you say to that person? What happened here? And then I would point out, hey, this is the result you got. This is the result you didn't get when you handle this situation one way, when you handle a situation the other way. He would lose his temper in a certain game and how he would react towards the referees or what he would say. I would take and pinpoint everything that happened before and afterwards and see how the psychology of what was going on in his head and the different results he was getting with the different emotions, thoughts, and actions that were going on with all these different things going on. Everyone got a chance to see The Last Dance, and you got to see how competitive he was. So this wasn't always him learning from me. This was a lot of me learning from him and understanding that mindset of that individual, how important winning was to him.
If we keep it at the Pistons for a moment, a big roadblock in his success. And I remember watching all those games and all those series and, especially the early series where the Bulls could not overcome. And, those guys were, I don't want to say anything bad. I mean, I enjoy any team that can win. And that was a cohesive Pistons team and they could win. But they played a brand of basketball back there in the late 80s, early 90s that I think if the young kids today had to experience it, they might run off the floor crying. I mean, those guys they were rough and tumble, weren't they?
Yes, they were. They did whatever the rules allowed them to do. Here it was. That's what it was. And they knew there was like, hey, listen, Chuck Daly had a rule. He goes, don't let Michael get airborne. If he gets in the air, we're in trouble. So that was like, hey, knock him on the floor, knock him on his ass, do what he's supposed to do. Make sure every time he comes to the lane, there are many hands on him. Every time there's a foul, make sure there's another foul afterwards. You can't be called for 2 fouls. So there was a strategy that was put into place, and they knew that it's just like boxing. If you continue to take those blows over and over and over again, it is going to take an adverse effect. It is. We had to develop that body and develop those muscles, not to be like a Teflon shield where he could take those blows and not only take those blows, be able to dish it out. And then when the Pistons saw that those blows weren't having the same effect anymore, then the psychological advantage kind of turned to the Bulls' favor.
This winning mindset that you write about, it's so motivational. I mean, anyone with a pulse, even if they can't execute, even if they're just breezily going through your book, when you start to wrap your arms around this winning mindset, it really does energize you. And I think one thing, and I want you to run with this and explain to people, so much we hear in life is all about balance. Okay, you're going to be a super high achiever and you're going to have balance and all this other kind of stuff. How many super high achievers have you met with, quote, balance?
None.
There we go.
Plain and simple, none. And you said high achievers is right there. Now, you'll get individuals who have reached that pinnacle of achievement, and now they have other people doing stuff for them, or they've developed enough wealth or whatever winning means to them, and now they can balance their lives a little bit more because they don't have those things. But nobody wants to talk about the time those high achievers took to get there, how many years and hours and decades they may have sacrificed where they didn't have any balance. Because what happens is, like I said in the book, winning demands obsession, or it'll find someone else to consume. Winning wants all of you. There is no balance. Everybody tells you need to have more balance. You need to have more balance. You don't find balance. That's the problem. You don't find balance. You create it. You create balance. And what you create balance and your definition of balance could be completely different than somebody else's. What happens when people tell you you need more balance? Well, you start to add more. You start to add. Everybody says, oh, well, I need more balance. So I need to spend more time here, more time here, more time here. So when somebody says you need more balance, you actually become more unbalanced because now you're trying to do all these things all over the place. It's like a juggler. I don't juggle, but I know it's a lot easier to juggle 3 things than it is to juggle 30 things. So when people tell you you need more balance, you kind of keep adding stuff, and that's not the way. How do you get closer to the balance that you want to create for yourself? It's not by the addition, it's by the deletion. It's by deleting the unessentials. This is deleting the unessential people in your life. It's deleting the unessential habits. It's deleting the unessential thoughts. It's deleting the unessential actions. It's deleting all these things that you need to do to be able to create that balance what you want. Remember, time for everything equals time for nothing. Balance is personal. It is personal. You don't want those scales tipping all the way, but you have to decide how much, where it's going to be, how much you want them to tip, where that balance is going to be for that high achiever. There's not a single individual out there. I know it sounds good. I don't talk the rah-rah language. That's not me, because that's not what winning is about. Everybody wants to make it sound good, like you need to have balance in your life in order to achieve these things and all this other stuff. Your greatest winners, your most successful business people, your most successful teachers, your educators, your social workers, whatever it is, they have very little balance in their life.
You could not have known everything you knew back in the day when you first met Michael that you know today. He must have been very comfortable with the idea of betting on you, betting on your energy, knowing that you knew a lot at that moment in time, but he was also betting on, I'm assuming, that you were going to be a constant learner as well.
One of the first things he told me, he said, you better keep up. You better keep up. That wasn't keeping up with him in traffic. That meant keeping up with him in life, keeping up with how things moved, how he studied, how he learned, how his brand grew. It had to be the same way. He adapted to situations. He adapted. He adjusted. He overcame. We all had to do that. And if you couldn't, you were replaced often. And there was many people that were part of his circle that didn't stay in that circle very long because they couldn't keep up. They didn't adjust. They didn't adapt. And we knew every time he won a championship that you had to make another adjustment because he was going to make an adjustment. And after each championship, he would always come up to me and say, hey, what's next? Because he knew if he came back exactly the same, and as good as he was, if he came back exactly the same, winning was not going to open its doors for him. It was going to be somebody else. So he knew he had to get better. We knew we had to get better. His training had to get better. His mindset had to get better. You know, his schedule, everything had to get better. Everything had to get a little bit better. We knew we had to figure those ways out. If we allowed him to figure those things out, then he isn't allowed to do what he does best. It was our job to figure those things out and implement those things. He put us in a position of trust. He said, I trust you guys to do this stuff. So make sure you get it done. Make sure you stay on top of things. And every now and then he would test. He would say, hey, did you hear so-and-so? I say, yes, I already know it. Or he'll be like, oh, this athlete is doing this. Or have you heard about this method? Already did the research on it, already got it. This is why we would use this. No, this is not, we're going to use this. This is why it's beneficial for this athlete, but it's not beneficial for you. And if we didn't know, this was extremely important with him, the part of being able to keep up. If we didn't know, we didn't guess. We didn't guess. We would say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Because if you're asking somebody a question, they don't need you to guess. They can guess on their own. Have the answer. If you don't know the answer, go find the answer out. Don't BS that person.
I want to go into a little Kobe in a second, but big picture wise, obviously you had a tremendous effect on what other people were seeing. Okay, they see Michael Jordan's results and people want to know who's the trainer he's working with. Speak to just big picture today across pro sports to the extent that you can or want to. How many pro athletes? I mean, the NBA is a pretty rarefied group. What, 300 guys maybe? I mean, there's some of the best athletes on the planet already. Some very natural, kind of born with it. Some work really hard at it. How many guys, or however you want to quantify this, where are we in terms of, if we look at the population of the NBA, guys that are employing the mindset and techniques that you have helped put forward? Do more guys today feel compelled to do it? Or is it still, there's still a rarefied air of people going all the way with the kind of mindset and techniques that you use?
Well, all the way, not many. There are quite a few players. Maybe every single player at some level is using some kind of outside coach, whether it be a skill coach or maybe a strength and conditioning individual. I'd say that's at a very high percentage. Whether that individual is adapting the program for that person, that I can't say. Now it's become more, who are the results aimed for? Because you get a lot of individuals that the first thing they do is before they even train a client, they already got a picture of that individual up on Instagram. Well, whose brand are you trying to build? Are you worried about the results, or are you trying to build your own brand? What is it? And I understand the trajectory of how people do business now has changed. and people want to get the information out there. But I always say, let the results speak for themselves. The mindset stuff is extremely difficult. And this is a good segue into talking about Kobe, because everybody talked about the mama mentality, the mama mentality. And I've said this to more individuals. I said, the mama mentality is not a mentality. It's a lifestyle. All right. And I've seen mama mentality destroy and hinder more careers than it's actually helped.
Define the Mamba mentality for those that might not be core basketball fans.
Mamba mentality is, in a nutshell, a no prisoner mentality. That's what it is. It's just when you're competing, nothing else matters. When you are in that, when you're in your competitive nature, whether it not only in games, whether it's in practice, whether it's just shooting free throws, whatever it is, you are so ultra focused that nothing else matters around you. It's to the point where you are so selfish about winning.
The zone, the flow state.
Yes, it's just those things. And you don't come down to anybody else's level. You make them rise to yours. You don't back down. It's a place where your mind is always stronger than your feelings. It's a huge thing over there. You understand? You don't say something nice to somebody because you don't want to hurt their feelings. It's like, it's truth. It's 100% truth. They always want you to be honest until it's time to be honest with them. You get to a certain point in your career where people are afraid to say no to you, or afraid to say, hey, this is wrong or this is incorrect. There's better ways of handling certain situations. That's what mama mentality is. So people love to say it. They love to hit like one basketball shot or throw one touchdown or whatever it is and say, oh, it's mama mentality. No, mama mentality, you don't talk about mama mentality. You just like, you go out there, you produce the results, you show what you're supposed to do.
What's the root of that in Kobe? Where did that start in him?
So what happened was he was going through a personal issue in his life at a certain stage in his career, and he wanted to create a separate alter ego identity to separate the two of what he was going on in his personal life and what was going on the basketball court. And I talk about this in the book, Winning, the movie Kill Bill. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but in the movie, there was an assassin named the Black Mamba. So obviously, if Kobe's looking at something, he's not going to name his alter ego after a garden snake. He's going to name it after the most venomous snake out there. He saw the idea there, and it kind of evolved into this thing of this personality of, when I step into practice, when I go to play the games, when I'm on the road, this is the mentality I need to have. When I step in between those lines, this is who I am. It allowed him to focus, like you said, be in that flow state and be that individual where it was no prisoners, no second guessing, knowing that in order to win, that he had to use his heart less. He had to use his mind more, not worry about other people's feelings, didn't care what anybody thought about how he played, what he said, and being able to constantly stay in that flow state that you were talking about.
I still remember some of those Boston series with Kobe. And as a Celtics fan, I was just like, damn, I grudgingly had to admit to myself, this guy is too good. I mean, he was just deadly. You had a nice setup on Michael, but speak to some of that one-on-one with you and Kobe. I mean, I'm not trying to compare and contrast. They've each got hellaciously incredible careers on their own, independently, just different stages and different generations and all that kind of stuff. Speak to your involvement with Kobe, perhaps a contrasted difference, something that was more unique in working with him.
The two biggest differences, I would say, was Michael had full trust in me. He was just like, hey, I hired you, go do what you're supposed to do. I shouldn't have to question you. If I have to question you, just have the right answer, as I mentioned earlier. Kobe wanted to know everything. He wanted to know every single detail. He wanted to know why we were doing this exercise, why we were doing this exercise in this particular order. Why am I eating this thing? Why do you have me taking a nap at this time? He wanted to know every single detail.
His questioning probably made you better though, huh?
It did make me better. I don't mind that. If I'm going to challenge you, you have the right to challenge me. Every single thing. And here's the thing. If I can't explain to you why we're doing something, and why I have you thinking this way, or why I have you eating something, or why I'm having you doing this exercise, why I don't have you doing this exercise, we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be doing it. There's a reason behind every single thing. And that reason is to get you a step closer to your next win. Challenge me all you want. And this was a way for him also to see, am I developing a program that was a Kobe Bryant program and not what a Michael Jordan program was? Yeah, there were pieces and foundations that were crossed. He wanted to make sure I wasn't just taking what Michael did, because his body type was different. His gameplay, the way he played was different. I wasn't just taking what worked for one individual and trying to force it onto him. And he would ask, he goes, hey, did you have Michael do this thing? But I would say, yes, I had Michael do this. Or no, I didn't have him do this. Yeah, I had Michael do this way, but I'm having you doing this way. This is why I have you eating this. And I had Michael eating this, because your metabolic rates are different in different stages of your careers and everything. This is why I want you thinking about these things. I had Michael thinking about other things over here. There was a reason behind everything.
God, the preparation, I can think back to when you first met Michael and then meeting Kobe, other athletes. But the preparation, I mean, you're not making it sound easy, but there is a heck of a lot of preparation for you in particular when you're dealing with individuals that are at this particular level. There's no faking it. I mean, you've got to be so prepared. I could just imagine you must have been burning the midnight oil, so to speak, in terms of your preparation every time you dealt with another high achiever in terms of professional athletes.
I burned through so much midnight oil, I think I might have caused some of the gas prices to go up. I had no choice. Going back to Michael early in his career, I always tell people I was the original Fitbit. So what I would do is I'd go to the game. I was blessed enough to go to majority of the games. I could watch the games, but I couldn't pay attention to the details that I wanted to. For our younger viewers, they're going to have no idea what I'm talking about here. There was these machines called Betamaxes and VHS recorders that you would actually record a game on. I would set that up to record the game. So then after the games, I would come home because I knew the workout for the next morning. I had to rewatch the game because I had to count all of MJ's steps. I had to count how many steps he took to the left, how many steps he took to the right, backwards, forward, sideways, how many jumps he did. Because if I didn't have that information, I wasn't prepared for the next workout tomorrow, because I needed to know if one side was more fatigued than the other. Did the right knee and the right ankle and the right hip take more stress than the left? And what parts, there was a part that he fell, and how did, what happened after that? So I literally would come home, it would be about a midnight, sit there, watch all the games again, do all the details, and then have to be back at Michael's the next morning, depending on what time the workout was. And the workouts were usually at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., or 7 a.m. So I would literally be going on anywhere from 3 to 4 hours sleep at the most.
I got kind of a side tangent question here before I bring it back to something that Kobe said. But in working with pro athletes, especially, let's say, the NBA guys up and down the court, who knows how many miles they're running in a game, is it possible for these guys to get to their 50s and 60s and still be not physically damaged? They're giving it all during their 20s and 30s, and it's kind of like no prisoner, and they kind of lose something.
100%. If you see a professional athlete in their 50s and 60s, listen, obviously stuff is changing now, but still, if you've given it all for 15, 20 years, there is going to be a body part or body parts that you're not going to be able to walk straight. Your fingers aren't going to be straight. Your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, your knees. There is going to be a detriment to something physically. If you're giving everything you got, if you're literally playing and practicing at the highest level. I have some of the top conditioned athletes that played the most amount of games in their career. And I don't have not one that doesn't have a issue after they retired. The crazy part about all this is we paid particular attention to all the areas that have a tendency to get injured. We paid attention to the ankles. We paid attention to the wrists, the fingers, just things that nobody else would think about. There's still physical issues with them.
I love this line from Kobe. It's on the first page of your book, and I don't think I've seen it before. I mean, I guess I should have seen it before, but Rest at the end, not in the middle. And that gets back to some of the mindset stuff at the beginning of our conversation. But I thought that's a good philosophical jumping off point as you and I wind down. Rest at the end, not in the middle. I guess a lot of people can interpret that in many ways. Why don't you give the Kobe interpretation and you can add some context and color to it?
Well, you know what? This fits in real good with the second to last chapter in the book where it says winning's not a marathon, it's a sprint with no finish line. A lot of individuals think they have the luxury of taking their time. You don't have the luxury of taking your time. You just don't, because time is something that we have no idea when it's going to be taken away from us. So when you get a lot of individuals that just kind of like are in cruise control, yeah, you know what, I got time, I'll have time to figure this out and so forth. Those individuals are constantly managing time. They're the individuals that manage time. The one thing we did with all our athletes and the whole idea about resting at the end and not resting in the middle, start managing focus. Because when you start managing focus, you have so much more time. Oh, just think about when you're in that state where you're so focused, how much more you can get done during that time when you're managing that focus instead of managing time. And people that manage time all the time, they love to rest in the middle. They're always like, oh, it's a break time here. I can take a little. Now, I'm not telling you, listen, you need to rejuvenate. You need to get distracted a little bit. You need to let the mind rest. You need to re-energize physically and mentally. But don't stay in that rest state for a long period of time. The people that stay in that rest state for a long period of time don't have the ability to finish. They don't have the ability to win because they have a tendency to get comfortable. We used to talk about this all the time is, everyone says, it's about the journey. Yeah, it is about the journey, but the journey has to have a destination. It has to have a destination. These individuals, they enjoyed the journey, but each one of their journeys had a destination, and that destination allowed them to rest at the end of that journey because they knew the next journey was going to start back up again. So for individuals that are out there, if you want to put something together with that line where it says, hey, rest at the end, not in the middle, start managing focus and stop managing time.
What's so cool about your work, your book, your books, several books, is that this winning mindset, too many people, maybe they get out of high school and they move into just a regular job or whatever, and they lose the feeling of what winning is about. They don't have anything in their life where they're competing still. It's like the spring unwinds. The only reason I wake up every day is I'm chasing a win. I'm chasing a win. If I'm not chasing a win, what am I doing? I mean, I wake up every day energized to work on the stuff that I'm working on. I am chasing a win every damn day, every day. I can't turn it off. But I think too many people, and you know this more than I, too many people lose that. They don't have it. I do think your book is a great reminder of folks that, and regardless of how old they are, I love finding those YouTube videos of there's two guys like 100 years old running 100-meter dashes in under 20 seconds.
Oh, I love those things too. Yes.
Those are great. That stuff is great, Speak to that issue though, of like people that perhaps think, well, I'm past it. I can't do this. I mean, they really can do it. They just need a swift kick and then you know what?
Those individuals, and this happens at a lot of stages in people's lives. When did you quit? When did you give up? What made you give up? What made you quit? That's what you have to address. Because the ability to win is in all of us. Winning is everywhere. It's every minute. You have the opportunity to win. I also think a lot with everything that's been going on in the world these last year and a half, 2 years, whatever it was. People forgot what a win looks like. They forgot what it feels like. They've forgotten and they've gotten comfortable. They've gotten comfortable making excuses. They've gotten comfortable blaming somebody else. They're looking for their wins to wear a halo all the time, and winning doesn't wear a halo all the time. A lot of the times it comes at you with fangs. Just like what you said, you get up every single morning excited. To, hey, listen, what's the next win I can get? You're not looking for steps. You're not looking for the easiest way. You're not looking for 5 easy steps to get this win or 5 steps to greatness. You're not looking for 10 steps to super mindset. Those individuals, that lose it, they're constantly looking for the easiest way. They're constantly looking for that one thing. How many times, Michael, do you get asked all this time, if you could give me one piece of advice? God, don't we wish it was that easy? If it was just one piece of advice. Those pieces of advice are infinite. Those steps are also infinite. They're constantly shifting. They're constantly changing. Sometimes you see them under your feet. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you can't even walk up those steps. When people, what happens is the ones that give up, they're looking to constantly walk up those steps, or they're looking for an escalator to carry them. And they just don't understand that sometimes you got to sit on those steps. You got to crawl on those steps. You got to fall down those steps. So they're just like, you know what? I just don't want to do this today. And then today turns into tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day. Winning requires you to show up every single day. It doesn't care about what happened yesterday. It could care less what had happened a year ago. It could care less about what happened 10 years ago. And too many times people get comfortable and they use their surroundings, their environments, their past, their present situation as excuses that allow them to put themselves in a comfort zone of always being a victim instead of being the victor.
Someone can't win for you. You've got to go win it. You can't hire someone to win for you.
Your obligation has to be greater than anybody else's obligation to you.
The book, Winning, The Unforgiving Race to Greatness. Motivational stuff. It's nighttime for me here in Asia, so now you've got me all jacked up. I will not be able to fall asleep.
Where are you?
I'm in Saigon, Vietnam.
Oh my goodness. How long you been there?
8 years. I was randomly living in San Diego, got invited on a speaking tour for one of my books, and I loved Asia. And I said, well, gosh, I was in 20 cities in a 3-month stretch, and I had the most fun in Saigon, so I said, I'm going to stay.
That's winning. That's winning. That is. How many people have come up to you and says, man, I could never do that. Or like, man, I wish I could do that. Well, why didn't you? You know, that's it. You did it.
I think you make an interesting point there, and I'm sure you could compare it to many other things. When it happens, you have to go. When it's go time and you see it, you can't hesitate. You must take it. Like you said, okay, you'll get too comfortable. You forget about it. You make excuses, et cetera, et cetera.
That's a great point. And I'll end with this. In the book, you said, listen, we're all going to have fear, but you can't have doubt. You had fear. You're like, do I really want to do this? But you didn't have any doubt that it was the right situation to you. Winning requires you to have no doubt.
That's a great one. Again, the book, Winning, The Unforgiving Race to Greatness. Tim, the book is everywhere, all that kind of fun stuff. Lots of great interviews that I've seen with you for this book. Where can we send people? Is there a website you want to direct them to?
I'm the easiest person to find. My website is timgrover.com, and my Instagram is @TimGrover.
Tim, cool stuff. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.
A repeat guest today, one of my favorites, a very plain-spoken, logical thinker, motivational, Mark Minervini. Today, Mark and I discuss his newest book, Mindset Secrets for Winning, How to Bring Personal Power to Everything You Do. For those of you that recall, Mark was first featured in one of Jack Schwager's Market Wizards books, very well known for his trading prowess. But today, a slightly different detour, and I respect that Mark has gone down a different path with this book than a pure trading book. It really is one of those books where you have no excuses. You take the wisdom or you don't take the wisdom. That's life. On, off, A, B, your choice. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my conversation with Mark Minervini.
How's it going? How you been?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Everything's going great. Just trying to stay healthy. That's the only thing that I really care about at this point. My family and my health.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think I revolve my life around health. That's my starting point. Like, I really don't do any work for the day, so to speak, until I've thought about what I'm going to do for my health that day.
Yeah, that was my goal many, many years ago. I wanted to become wealthy because I wanted to have the freedom to, I used to say, I want my biggest decision of the day to be what I'm going to eat. Maybe have a nice garden and go out and pick my vegetables and eat healthy foods, healthy greens that I grow myself. My why for even trading wasn't about money. It was about what money could do, and it was about health and freedom and living a better life.
I think till most people get a little money, sometimes they imagine all these other things. And then once they have a little money, they realize, well, okay, it really wasn't that.
Exactly. Exactly. I used to always want toys and cars and things. I was never really a very materialistic person, but I always dreamt about those things. Then when I could able to afford them, then I didn't want them. Then they just seemed like a burden.
Isn't it funny? I am envious sometimes if I flip on YouTube and I see a show of Jay Leno and all his cars. But then I say to myself, to be Jay Leno and to have his 500 cars and whatnot, he's put his 50 million or 100 million investing in this whole thing. But that's going to own you to some degree. That's a lot of responsibility to have all those things.
Oh, yeah. It's something else. I know. I was just watching him the other day. He's got that show. I don't know if you saw it. It's on reruns now, like on Netflix, where he drives around with celebrities and interviews them. Oh, no, actually, no. That
Seinfeld. That's great, too. That's a great show as well. Yeah.
The other car guy. Yeah, and he was like driving around with Eddie Murphy and various people.
If money is absolutely no object, I can understand having all the toys and all that kind of stuff, but it does own you. You know, I wanted to start today, though. I was looking through my Twitter feed, and I thought it was such a great proverb to start with. I saw it this morning, and it was, I think it's on some handle called Zen Essentials. Very simple. The obstacle is the path, a famous Zen proverb. Isn't that so true? Now, if you were to hear that, you were to start to break it down for people. The obstacle's the path. That makes no sense. What do you mean the obstacle's the path? I'm overweight, or I want to learn this, or this is hard. But the obstacle is the path, isn't it?
Yeah, the process is the path. The path is the path. I mean, it's all you have is the path. The destination, you hit the destination, it's over. The whole idea is the path, is the journey. But you try to get that destination, so you're constantly trying to strive to that destination that you forget about the process. That's sort of what my whole book's about, is staying in process, learning how to get the process right, and then the result happens automatically.
That's so difficult to bring across to people, whether you're talking business, sports, life. It is the process. The outcome, okay, you can't control that, but you can control your process.
Yeah. You certainly can.
How do you start to bring people into an understanding of process? Because you've laid it out right there at the beginning. This is really important to you, and it's really important just to be effective in life. How do you start to explain your mindset for process?
I always explain it like this. I tell people, if you were to look at the top of a mountain, let's say we're looking at the top of Mount Everest, and you started thinking about climbing it, you might not even try because it just looks so daunting. But if you were to break it down and to think about climbing up maybe to the first base camp and then resting, then thinking about how you would climb to the next base camp and start stringing that together in your mind, you could then see yourself climbing it and you could attempt it. It's all about how you frame the challenge. If you're looking at the result, especially if it's a very lofty goal, it could seem so far away. So you're not creating that expectancy. Also, it takes a number of steps to get to anything great. No one gets to anything great overnight. You really have to break it down and stay in that and trust that that process is going to get you to that destination. If you keep looking at the destination, your eye's not on the ball. You can't look at the scoreboard and then hit a fastball coming over the plate.
I mean, if you don't trust the process, you just look at that destination, you'll never get there. You'll just spin your wheels, so to speak. So many people will do that in their entire life on all of their decision making. They will just see the outcome, imagine the outcome, and sit on the couch for 30 years imagining the outcome as time goes by.
That person will say, I've tried everything and I've worked hard. They might have worked really hard, maybe even harder than somebody else who's attained it. Working hard doesn't necessarily get you to your goal because you may be working so hard that you're actually over trying. And when you over try, that's where you get out of process. I used to do this when I went into competitions. More recently, I shoot in shooting competitions now. When I first started going, I started shooting competitions quite late in my life when I was 50. So certainly something that I took up late in life. I would be so concerned with I can't finish worse than fourth or fifth. I got to be in the top five. Got to be in the top five. And then as soon as I made one mistake during the competition, which you're inevitably going to do, I was like, oh no, that's it. I'm out of. I'm probably in sixth or seventh now. And then it was just like a total spiral. I just changed the whole thing and just said, I'm not even going to be concerned where I finish. My goal was to just be the best I could that day. And in the face of anything that happens, continuously just give it my best. Even if I completely blow it for the first half of the day, will then be the absolute best I can for the second half of the day. Then later on, go take a look at the scoreboard and say, I wonder where I finished. All of a sudden, I started finishing much better, and then I started winning.
I was milling around your world in advance of this call, and I thought I caught something about shooting, and I thought I saw a small video. Where did this start? Explain to me. What are you doing? I want to know the details. I want the nitty-gritty. Go back to the beginning on the shooting. I want to know when the shift happened, how it happened, why it happened, where did it start, what was the influence, what was the inspiration?
It's not like just sitting there very boringly and shooting at a stagnant target. You're running as fast as you can, and you're going through obstacle courses. You've got to think and you've got to plan. It's very, very fast. So it's aerobic, and it's sort of like an obstacle course while you're shooting. So it's very challenging. And a friend of mine was doing it and asked me to go with him to watch. I said, I'm really not interested in that. I don't think that's going to be boring for me. So I went and watched it, and I said, wow, this is actually pretty cool. You're running around, and it's a lot of thinking and a lot of pressure. I like being under pressure. I lived my whole life under pressure with trading and a lot of things that I've done with sports. He said, you should try it. Anyway, I borrowed some equipment and I tried it. My very first time I came in I think it was like 8th place out of 40 people. And he's like, you're pretty good at this. I mean, you did really good. You could probably be good if you spent some time. I fell in love with it. Now I have my own range that I train on.
How long have you been at it?
I don't know, 4 years now, maybe. Not a long time. Started when I was about 50. I'll be 55 in January.
Did you have any shooting experience before that?
Long, long time ago when I was a kid, I used to shoot shotguns. I shot skeet and trap. Completely different. Nothing to do with pistols. I always found it boring because anything I ever saw was just sitting with stationary targets. So this was like all new to me. And this is big, in Texas and in the South. Shooting is big, of course, and these competitions are worldwide. It's something that I love now, and it's super challenging, and just another thing that I decided to take on a new challenge.
Let me keep you at this for a moment. Let's talk about the process of becoming better at it. I'm sure there's a lot of self-practice. How have you received mentorship? Has it been observing other people, YouTube videos? Has it been in-person instruction? How has your process been to get better at this?
I definitely have a process that how I approach virtually anything that I attempt that is something new. Of course, with YouTube and with social media, you have information overload now. You have almost too much information. At one time, we had no information. I played the drums my whole life. We used to have to take the record and go back and play it, move the needle back 1,000 times to figure out a part. Now you go on YouTube and the person who wrote that part is teaching you. It's a lot easier to learn now. Of course, I'm fortunate that I've got the means to be able to hire good mentors. I try to find the best there is in the world, and that's what I did with shooting. I went to some of the best people in the world, spend a lot of time with them, but I made sure I got the right information right away. And I did the same thing with my photography. I took a look at it, and it wasn't looking like I was hoping. I realized that step one was realize that I sucked at it, and I needed to find somebody really great that could teach me how to not suck. Just going off of guns for a minute with my photography, and it's the same thing with the guns. It's exactly the same process. I hired this photographer who shot for Vogue. He was in Miami. I loved his work. I called him up and I said, hey, I would love to have you spend some time with me. I'm willing to pay you for a weekend. He said to me, well, let me ask you a question. I'd like to see your photos. So I sent them to him. He said, I don't ask you a question. I saw your photos. Are you willing to admit that you suck? So I said to him, you came to the right guy, because I already think I suck. So he said, okay, well, then I'll spend some time with you. It's the same thing that I tell people all the time. You have to realize that you're not at the place you want to be. You're not an expert at it maybe now, and you've got to empty your cup. Find somebody who is worthy of filling your cup, but you got to allow them to fill it and have an empty cup. I go to the best there is with an empty cup and say, here, teach me, and I'm going to listen to everything and do it exactly like you say. Then it's a lot of practice and, and a lot of going over the stuff over and over until you master it. It takes years to master virtually anything. That's the starting point, though, is to get the right advice and also the right equipment. For instance, made sure that I got really good lenses and a good camera, so I couldn't look at somebody else's work and go, oh, yeah, he's got a $2,000 lens. That's why it looks like that. Oh, he's got a better camera than me. I remove all the excuses, get the best equipment, get the best training, and now it's all on you.
I have an ego question. When I talk to many people, let's say people that have not had a chance to achieve like you have achieved yet, many people, when they're still facing the idea of their first achievement, the ego seems to be the biggest burden when I observe. Like, just can't admit what you just said. I suck. I need help. Whereas I feel the same way, and I feel like so many times on this podcast, I get a chance to talk to all these brilliant people, have these niche understandings that I don't know about, get to ask them questions. But what is it about so many people when they're starting out and they're facing that kind of, God, I want to get that first achievement, that the ego just prevents them from asking for help?
I think I have figured that out. Thank God over the years, it took me a long, long time to escape that trap. You want to figure it out for yourself. When you're a kid, you don't want any help. You want to make maybe your dad proud or your coach proud. You want to figure it out for yourself. You want to show them. You want to show the people that taught you or the people that you look up to that you're good. You want to show them that I did this myself. You take that with you. But that doesn't mean that you don't need a coach, and figuring out yourself. Part of it is figuring it out by learning and getting that information. I don't know. At some point along the line in my life, I decided it was more important to be successful than it was to try to be right. And I realized that most things I wasn't going to figure out by myself, or it was going to take so long that why not just learn? That's the whole concept of life, is to do, achieve, learn the lessons, pass them on to other people. Then they get better and then they pass them on. And it's this perpetual torch that we pass. That is sort of one of the meanings of life.
I love something in your work where you say, as you talk about decision, that the most important decision is to decide. You have to decide. Deciding is the first important decision.
Well, you have to decide to decide.
It's the derivative of decision.
Making a decision is a decision. To decide means that, okay, this is it. Today, I'm done. I'm fed up. No more. Today, this is it. I'm never smoking again. I'm going to live healthy. I'm not going to think of myself as a fat person anymore. I'm going to think of myself as someone who is overweight. I can change my lifestyle, whatever it is. All right. I just use those two because they're the most common: quitting smoking, exercising, and eating right. These are things that, of course, challenge many people. The first thing is you have to make that decision. You have to decide that today's the day and draw the line in the sand. I did that with my trading. I was not making money for year after year after year after year. And then finally I said, I got to figure this out. I got to get good mentorship. I got to find out what the common denominators are, what I'm doing wrong. And then I realized I wasn't cutting my losses, that I was letting stocks blow up every now and then. That's what was causing all the problems. So I said, this is it. Today is the day. I am never, ever going to take a big loss ever again. And if I do blow myself up, if I do go broke, I'm going to take 1,000 small losses. I'm going to live and die by the sword. And that was it. And that's where everything changed from that point on for me, for my trading.
Very difficult for people to do. Until they hear someone like you say it and give them permission to think in a different way, the mob of society pushes most people to think the entirely opposite direction than you just described.
Yeah, well, it takes a level of confidence in the outcome. There has to be some expectancy in your mind. I got asked this question recently. I did my recent workshop, my annual workshop, about a week ago. I was asked about building expectancy, expecting good things to happen, and how you keep expecting something good when you're not doing very well. The difference between, I think, winning and losing a battle to get to a goal is, I think the winner, as they put in a year and nothing happens, they say, I'm a year closer. And then they put in a second year and a third year, and they say, wow, I must be closer. I mean, I put in 3 whole years. Now, 6 years later, they're still not there. And they're going, it's got to be right around the corner. The other person who doesn't make it usually doesn't make it anywhere near that point, because after the first year they go, oh, I'm never going to get there. Another 6 months or a year, they go, oh, this is just getting worse. And that's it. I'm not going to keep waiting. I wasted all this time. They're thinking about the time they wasted and looking back of how far they've come from where they started, as opposed to thinking how close they are to the goal. It's just building mental expectancy. I'm not even sure how I ended up on this topic with you, where you started with the question, but
are there rules to our conversation? There's no rules, Mark.
No, none at all.
We're just following the path, following the trend. Hey, let me keep it at expectancy for a second. What I find interesting about it, and I guess, and you can correct me if you've got a different perspective, when I hear you describe expectancy, I hear someone that sounds like they're describing a form of self-confidence, a self-belief. What I find interesting about it, when you have that perspective and people feel it, especially in person, that can sometimes scare people. It can intimidate them. Other people can feel jealous. Maybe they can think, oh, Mark, he's just cocky. But it's not that. Deep down, I think when people truly see somebody that has that expectancy, they might feel all these other things, but it's really, they want it too. They just don't know how to get it. And sometimes I think they might, how is this guy, Mark, why is he so confident? Where does he get this expectancy from? Why does he have it? They just can't figure it out. It's all in the mind. It's just a decision in the mind.
Well, don't think for a second along that way I didn't want to quit 800 times and I wasn't crying and kicking and screaming. And I mean, it's not easy. And I struggled and struggled and struggled and felt like quitting so many times and was completely demoralized. But the difference is that I would constantly look at people who did it. Many times there was people who started off worse off than me. Again, removing the excuses, here's someone who started with less than me and they did it. So I just said, that's just a man just like me. I had a belief in the process. So I just learned, what is that process? What's the process that that person followed? I made an unconditional commitment. It's a trust. It's a trust in learning. It's a trust in being able to learn. I know I have a brain and my brain is healthy and I know I can learn. And as long as I can learn and I'm willing to learn, I can self-correct. And over time, I'm going to get to where I need to get. Again, you have to get off the destination and a timeline. Unconditional persistence means you persist until, and there is no quit. That's what's hard, I think, for most people. But if you love what you're doing, it's a lot easier.
Now, you've laid out some interesting things in this conversation. You've said your age, early to mid 50s. You've talked about something new like shooting, something new like photography. You sound like a teenager. Now, other people are sitting around at your same age, and they're thinking about, what are my pension benefits? Oh, my God, my legs hurt. I can't move. I can't do this. This is such mindset. Why in the world should any of us have anything other than an open-minded teenager's perspective for our entire life? I mean, right? How do you have it?
Well, I feel like I am sort of ultra-conservative, even though I've done a lot of things and I've been described as a Renaissance man many times. I know people that are in their 70s and 80s that are doing Ironman competitions and are my heroes. There's a gentleman by the name of Jerry Rothaus who just came to my workshop just last week. He's got a website, I think it's called sweatingseniors.com. If you see what this guy's doing in his 70s, holy cow, I feel like
we're slackers, huh?
Yeah, I'm a slacker. I told him, he came up to me and he asked me to sign my new book. When I signed the book, I said, you are my hero. I signed the book, but it was awesome to see him. I always look at the people that are doing more than me and always try to keep company of people that are better than me, and that keeps me going.
I'm only a few years younger than you, and I still enjoy going to the track every week and running sprints. I'm still pretty quick. I can go to YouTube and I can find, I think there's a pair of 100-year-old guys that are running the 100-meter dash in under 20 seconds. And you're just like, okay, you know what? I got a lot more work to do. Because these guys have got me and you by 50 years, and they're still out there pushing the pavement.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you, what do you run the 40 in?
What do I run the 40 in now at 51? I'm sure I could be under 5 seconds.
I ran it 4.8 about 5 years ago. I haven't timed it since then. But a friend of mine's daughter was a track runner, and she was like 15 years old. And he said, we were talking about it, and he said, yeah, my daughter's fast. And I said, I bet you I could beat her. He was like, are you out of your mind? And she beat me, but she only beat me by a tenth of a second. She run like a 4.7, and I run a 4.8. I don't think I can come close to that right now. I'm in the last 5 years, I'm nowhere near. Once you hit 50, it seems the warranty expires and things start
Oh,
breaking. Things start breaking.
we're not going to let you allow it to go that direction.
Oh, I'm not going to let it stop me. Believe me, I'm going to go down the street and the hubcaps are going to fly off and the wheels are going to fly off and I'm going to go down swinging. Don't worry. But I don't think I can under 5 seconds now.
Tom Brady is giving us all the inspiration, but I don't know if he can go under 5 seconds right now.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, just talking about running and people that inspire you to do more. And of course, when somebody does something, it shows you what is possible. Those are the heroes. Those are the leaders that show you what's possible. And then that shows you what you could maybe do and even exceed. We just had someone break the 2-hour marathon. You probably know about that. And watch what happens. I'll bet you within the next, I don't know, 6 months, few years, you're going to see other people break it. It's going to get broken. Just like the 4-minute mile. Right after the 4-minute mile got broken by Roger Bannister, all of a sudden, a bunch of people start breaking the 4-minute mile because that mental barrier got broken. That's what inspires me. That's what inspires the world. That's what inspires people. Humans are encoded to be better. There's no doubt that in 50 years, we'll be faster and stronger. And in 100 years, we'll be even faster and stronger than that and more intelligent.
You laid out something interesting a few minutes ago. You talked about how people want to figure it out on their own, kind of the puzzle thinking, which I think we all need to do to some degree. It is part of being human. It does feel nice to solve the puzzle. But running in parallel to our side of ourselves that's trying to figure out our own puzzle is all of this other side of the equation, which you can learn to think like such and such. So while we are figuring out the puzzle, we can't be oblivious to all of this learning that has taken place for thousands of years that we can pull from. Now, some people might be thinking, thousands of years, Mike? Well, you're crazy. Well, hold on. You and I talked about at the beginning of this conversation, I'd love you to go there as well, too, which is the Zen Buddhism mindset. I mean, where did that come from you for? I mean, how did you find that Zen Buddhist mindset? I mean, that's terribly important.
I happen to be Buddhist, and I don't even know if you know that, but I'm probably not the best person to really talk about or represent Buddhism. But when it comes to a Zen mindset, I just think of that as ease of movement and doing things that are efficient and effective. Again, you talked about figuring it out on your own. Look, even if you get taught by the best in the world, you still got to do 99% of the heavy lifting on your own. You got a coach that helps you and you practice to go to the Olympics. When you're on a 4-inch beam, 4 feet off the floor in front of the whole world and you've got a backflip, no one's there. It's all on your own. You still own your own success, but there's nothing wrong with pulling from a body of knowledge and then contributing to that same body of knowledge when you're done.
Yeah, it's kind of a theme of this conversation so far is like, how does one work on their self, but at the same time bring in the coaching, bring in the learning? It's a tricky balance to figure out.
I love to learn. I have right now, as we're speaking, in my office behind me, I have about 4,000 books in my library. And I've read every one of them, and I've read some of them 100 times. I reread books that I was reading 30 years ago. I reread now, and I've read them over and over and over, and I internalize them, and I come back to them. I love to learn. I love to be coached. I love to work with teams, with people that are better than me. I mean, I just find it enjoyable. I know some people, like I said, they want to figure it out themselves, but there's an enjoyment in learning from others.
Let's talk about excuses for a moment. A phrase from your work: you own it all. Don't we all own it? You own it all.
Yeah, you own it all. What I mean by that is some people say, well, how can you say that you create everything in your life? What if you get cancer or something? You're driving down the street and some random truck comes around the corner and hits you. Okay, maybe you didn't cause that. Maybe you did in some way that we don't understand. But let's just say you didn't. But let me ask you this. Do you now own the problem? Do you now own the result? Are you the one sitting in a wheelchair or in a hospital? You ultimately always become the owner. Ownership is empowering. If you exclaim that I am the creator, I create my experience, I create my life, well, then you automatically are the uncreator and the recreator. But you can't be that if you don't take that ownership.
We're sitting here as two guys that are talking about active things on this podcast. I am not averse to having the stoic mindset where I say to myself, okay, right now I can go do sprints. But what happens if I lose that ability? What happens if I get injured? What happens if I'm in a wheelchair? How will I deal? What can I do? I think the great thing about, for example, look at our communication. We're like 8,000 miles away. We have access to all this tech. The great thing about the modern age is if the physical stuff changes, you can still keep that gray matter engaged like you're one of the most accomplished achievers on the planet. It doesn't stop. There really is no excuse. And again, back to your point, you own it.
Yeah. I mean, just going to the technology, I learned a lot about photography from a photographer in Russia, which we Skyped. He would teach me over Skype. I know I digressed a little bit off of the point you were making, but just it struck me with the technology. I completely forgot where you are, where this is coming from. You're around the other side of the world.
It's just a fabulous thing that when one goes ahead and takes the ownership and kind of gets that as an exciting point, I own it and I'm going to do it, and it becomes exciting instead of a burden or something negative. It's awesome to own it.
Oh, yeah. Ownership is wonderful. The reason why we don't take ownership and we resort to blame is because we default to blame because it's like a hot potato. We have a problem and we want to pass the responsibility on to something else or someone else. Again, it's the ego. We look at it as blame. Blame and ownership are completely different. I say, well, you got to take responsibility. And I say, well, I'm not to blame for this. No. Responsibility is the ability to respond. You're acknowledging that you have the ability to respond. Blame means you're a victim and you don't have any ability to change anything. You don't have the ability to respond. You're just being victimized, and that's it. That's where it ends. Responsibility is knowing that you have the ability to respond. You choose what you do, what you say, and most of all, you choose what things mean to you. Even if something is perceived by somebody as negative, somebody else perceives it as a completely different challenge to them.
I want to shift you as we jump around your world and jump around your topics as we're digging through the mindset secrets for winning. Performing your best under pressure at these big moments. I would share with you my perspective. For example, I think these days, if I'm doing something that would be considered under pressure, it would be a speaking engagement before a decent crowd, a smart crowd. And I think a lot of people might think, wow, that feels, what do you have to do, Mike? How do you have to prep for that? I don't really prep any differently than I would prep before getting on a call with you. Even if I'm going to speak in front of 1,000 people, I just do my thing. And then when I walk out there, I don't feel any different than I feel talking to you. Speak to the preparation for a peak performance moment, how that unfolds for you, how you feel in those moments. You could use your gun example. You could use photography, anything you want to use.
Well, I always try to prepare as close to the scenario that I'm going to face. And that's where people go wrong. They practice one way under certain conditions, which are usually a lot more lenient, maybe a lot more repetitive. Like, for instance, if you just were in a batting cage hitting ball after ball after ball after ball, or maybe you were to go and practice a routine like before the Olympics, you practice a routine over and over and over, but then you go to the Olympics and you only have one chance to do it. Bridging the gap between how you practice and how you actually perform is really what's important. And that's the entire second half of my book is dedicated to mastering perfect practice. You've, of course, heard of deliberate practice. It takes 10,000 hours to master something. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. I think that can be shortened quite a bit. But you have to practice correctly. You definitely have to practice correctly. And most people practice incorrectly, and they don't practice under conditions, not just physical conditions, but mental conditions. Your mind, when you go to your performance or you go on that stage, is in the same place that it is right now with us just talking.
Yeah, it starts with the mindset. But you make a great point. For example, you mentioned the batting cage. I spent 10 years of my life understanding how it works. Live pitching and the batting cage are two different animals. The batting cage is needed. You could go into a batting cage and you could master hitting 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, but I guarantee you that if you showed up in the World Series right now, you'd strike out every damn time.
It's a whole nother story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And why is that? It's exactly the same physical task. It's your mind. It's your mindset, of course, and how you deal with pressure. You can go in the batting cage and get the repetition to get the physical habit and get the physical repetitions down. But when you go to that big event where everybody's watching you and it's all on the line, that's where we go back to what's encoded in us from thousands and thousands of years ago of always being on the lookout for what's wrong. When the average person looks in the mirror, they see what's wrong. My nose is too big. My eyes are too small. My breasts are too small. I'm bald, whatever it is. We immediately start finding fault. That's because we're programmed. We're programmed to look for problems as a mechanism to ensure our safety and our security, because at one time we're walking around at risk of getting eaten alive and getting attacked. It's been encoded just like an alligator comes out of that shell snapping. It's encoded in their DNA.
You know, Mark, you keep doing your thing, okay? Your thing might change. You've mentioned many activities that you're involved in. For a lot of people, they worry about what other people think of them. I don't think you, Mark, have that anymore, really. I'm guessing you don't. I don't really feel like I do. I mean, maybe on some small area for a moment, what someone thinks of me will catch my eye and then it goes away within seconds and I forget about it. But a lot of people really dwell on what other people think of them. And especially with social media and this whole construct of showing off what you're doing and comparing to the next person. When's the last time that you can really remember affecting your life that you were being influenced by what others thought of you? Is it a long, long time ago?
It's a long, long time ago, but I'll tell you, it doesn't mean that. I mean, even on Twitter, someone makes a comment and I might immediately come back at them and correct them. And I've been times where it's been a little more than a correction.
When you do that, you don't hold on to it. You let go of it, I'm sure. Like you probably don't remember it the next day or the next 10 minutes probably.
No, not at all. I don't remember it. I don't remember anything negative very long because I have my mind works in a natural way to constantly focus on catching myself doing things right and positive, and I just sort of delete that. It's like a delete button. So I delete it and would have to be reminded. I deal with it at the moment, and I do the same things. For instance, if I were to have, let's just say in a competition, I have a blow up. Look, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to go and cry and kick and scream and get angry, but I give myself a very short time just to grieve and to let the steam off. But then, boom, it's back to work. It's back to moving forward with process and learning from it and saying, okay, what just happened? What can I learn from that? Why did that happen? How can I get it better this time? And how could I take what just happened and turn that into a positive and look at it just as information? But we're human beings, of course. We get emotional and somebody says something hurtful. It affects us, but it's the difference between having an initial impact and having it something where it changes your life because you dwell on it and you think that's you or you take it personally where it starts becoming part of your identity.
What do people come at you about? You mentioned, for example, a Twitter troll hitting you up on something, but with your content, when I go through your content is inspirational. Your content is self-improvement, motivational. Do people come at you for this particular content and want to like find some weak chink in the armor? Do people actually do that?
Well, I have to say, surprisingly, out of all the people and that follow me on social media, that it's so few that I'm actually surprised. I would think it would be more because when you're successful, there's always people that they want to find the chink in the armor. That's par for the course. But I've been fortunate that the people that correspond with me on a daily basis are just incredible. I mean, some of the most beautiful people. Even when I do my seminars, every year after my seminar, I say, oh my God, I'm never doing this again. And then I meet everybody and we hug and then I leave and I go, how can I not do this? I mean, it's so rewarding. And so many people I touched and they touched me. It's just amazing. But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how people sometimes interpret things. But I'll tell you something. It just happened just the other day. you're an intelligent guy. Maybe you can comment on this. Sometimes I have people that are critical and say that because I'm successful, that I shouldn't be charging for seminars or I shouldn't be promoting my books and things. If I was a real guy and was really successful trader, I wouldn't have to sell anything. I mean, just recently I said, well, Bill Gates doesn't have to sell Windows, and Steve Jobs didn't have to sell iPhones and iPads and things. So I don't really quite understand that. But every now and then I guess somebody says something like that. I think that's a little off the wall myself.
I look at it like this way. You're kind of like, and maybe I can think of myself like this too, and I'm not being cocky, but you're kind of like a mini version of Harvard without all the bureaucracy. You are an educator that is giving your perspective gleaned from years and years and years of experience. You're also a man of commerce. I am too. When you take those kinds of things and blend them together, there are some people that cannot stand the notion that commerce exists. They don't like it. And if an enterprising young person, let's don't talk about me or you. Let's say an enterprising young person. Let's say 20-year-old guy. He doesn't really know much about a particular subject, but he spends 5 years and becomes this coding expert. And he knows these techniques for learning this coding that are just fabulous. And he says to himself, after he's made some money on perhaps a startup or something, and he wants to share that information. I think there's a mental defect that causes somebody to want to criticize that 25-year-old guy with all that experience who wants to share his coding insights for commerce, for capitalism reasons. What is wrong with that? There is a significant number of people that just deep in their bones, they don't like it. I have my theories as to why they don't like it. I think it comes down to petty jealousy often, but it is what it is, right?
Well, I think it's somewhat presumptuous too, because who's to say that I don't take all that money from quote unquote my commerce life and donate it to charity? I mean, no one knows what I personally do with that money, first of all. But on top of that, see, I want my doctor to get paid really well. I want my pilot to be paid really well. I want my lawyer to be paid really well. I want them to have incentive to be great. I believe in capitalism. I believe in free markets. I believe in incentives. I want these people to be paid well, and I want them to have incentive.
You make a great point with incentive. And look, Warren Buffett's a great example. Why do people give their money to Warren Buffett? Because they're going to get something back. They're going to get something back in return. He is incentivized to give more and more of his effort in this capitalistic system, and then people give him more. It's the same with you. It's the same with me. It's the same with the 20-year-old tech guy that I made up. It's the same point. It is very true, though, that a lot of people just I don't know where their thinking either was it started wrong with the parents or they didn't get the right education in school. Something went wrong, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but I know one thing. No one has lasting success if they're not creating value. Maybe they have short-term success, lasting success, long-term success, around for a long time, consistent. Nobody has that unless they're creating value. It just doesn't work that way.
Mark, where am I reaching you today, by the way? What secret bunker are you in somewhere in the United States?
Yeah, I'm in the deep south right now.
Mindsets for winning, how to bring personal power to everything you do. I appreciate the effort. I am looking at myself, not by no means a copy of what you're doing here, but I think there's been a lot of things in my life that I want to put to paper that have nothing to do with the trading world, but you inspire me with what you've done here because I want to at some stage give my take on this, but you've done a really nice job and I think people will enjoy this.
Well, I appreciate it and just want to say every time I've done an interview with you, and I do a lot of interviews, but I feel like it's an interview, like it's an Oprah type interview because you're so good. I always watch Oprah and I go, wow, she's so good. She's just such a great interviewer. And I feel that way with you. It's always fun and so easy and just all this stuff comes out and I go, wow, that's really good. That was great what we just talked about. It's you pull it out. So great job.
Well, thank you. I feel bad, though. Like sometimes I've been doing this recently, starting these conversations off and just start casually talking. You're like the fifth person in the last 10 interviews who's like, is this rolling? Are we, it's kind of like, I need to start telling people that the conversation has started.
No, you don't. Let me just tell you one very quick story. When I was in the music business, I had recording studios. I don't know if some of people know that I was a drummer for years, and I had recording studios. I was a producer. When we get someone in the vocal booth, I would say to them, hey, we're just going to set settings here. We're going to have a few passes. So I want to hear you do the track. Just sing it. We're not recording, though. Guess which one 9 out of 10 times was the track that we used? The one that they thought they weren't rolling, because they were nice and relaxed and everything went smooth. And then you play them back. You say, which track do you like? And they go, this one. Oh, that's the one that you thought you were just practicing. So I think you should maybe continue that.
A side tangent as you go off on the music. I think it's interesting to look at music because if you look at, for example, the decade of the 1970s, so much music often had an authentic feel, or songs that became famous had something unique or a piece of dialogue that existed inside the song. Then we move into the 80s, 90s, and today things get so produced and so overproduced. I think you make a great point, is that sometimes when you're not thinking that you're on, you give your best effort.
Yeah, you let that subconscious take over and your natural creative beauty come out that you're blocking with your conscious mind because about worrying that you're going to be inferior and afraid you're going to be ridiculed or laughed at. And that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea, is to let the subconscious. Of course, you got to be good. You're not going to go into that vocal booth and if you can't sing, but you already build that talent. Now you got to let it shine. You got to let it shine. And then a lot of people have talent and they can't take it to that level because they just can't let it shine. They can't let go. Again, that's what this whole book's about.
I'll end it with one more side tangent on this musical side for people if they want to see something about being kind of this authentic and just going with it. There are some fantastic live performances of the Eagles singing Hotel California on YouTube. And you just say to yourself, how do they pull that off? You're like, wow, you're just in awe that they could be such in the moment and be so good live. It's not a carbon copy of the album, but in some ways it's better than the album. It's just amazing to watch people when they get into that zone.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason legends are legends.
The book, Mindset Secrets for Winning, How to Bring Personal Power to Everything You Do. Mark, where can we send people?
I guess Amazon, because I don't even have a website for this book, believe it or not.
You're on Twitter. You mentioned that. And you've got a personal website. I guess your last name, Intervini. That's probably the best place to send people?
That's basically from my stock services, which is a big deviation from what I'm known for in the financial trading markets. But this is, I think, the most important piece of the puzzle. That's why I did it, because I actually think this is the most important piece of the puzzle that ties it all together, because where the mind goes, everything else follows. Yeah, just Intervini.com. And, of course, you can get the book on Amazon.
I just want to say one last thing. Blasphemy. You say this is the most important piece of the puzzle. Somebody out there right now is thinking, no, I just want to know when to enter and when to exit. What are you talking about, Mark?
Yeah, well, that takes pulling the trigger. You can maybe do that, but how about when you do that and you build your account and then you got to do it with $1 million position and it moves against you and it's a little bit more pressure. And then now you got to have the mind to be able to deal with that. To grow your account, and you're going to have to eventually trade much larger. And that's one of the problems. I know we're going on to stocks now, but that's one of the problems that we see, is that someone starts off small. It could be in anything from Little League Baseball to the major leagues, or whatever, however you want to, whatever metaphor or thing you want to compare it to. But then you get to the big leagues and all of a sudden you're not making those same decisions because, again, you ignored the most important part of the puzzle, and that's your mind.
I agree 100%. Thank you, sir, for coming on. Hopefully we can do it again in the future when the next book comes, because there's always another one.
True. Just real quick, back, you mentioned the book earlier and you said mindset for winning. You said it later, you said it fine, but just want to let you know that you did not pronounce it correctly in the middle of the, like maybe 2/3 through.
Mindset Secrets for Winning.
Yeah, you said mindset for winning back the first time you mentioned it, but then the last time you said it fine over here. But I just wanted to let you know.
People need to know this is why Mark is successful, because he notes the details. You have to note the details. You can't go through life not paying attention to the details. So if you get in on an interview with this guy Covel and he mispronounces your book, you have to be comfortable to correct him at the end. And so hopefully Covel won't go cry that he got embarrassed on his podcast for saying the dang book cover wrong.
I'm okay with it. I'm just looking out for you.
Mark, I appreciate you coming on again.
I know
Thank
you're a
you.
perfectionist. I know you like things done right.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Hey, take care, man. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.